Okay, folks, we're recording. Get all your hair ready. We're starting. Tone, welcome. Could you put your camera on, please? I'm boring myself now. Okay. Good to see you. Can you hear me, Tone?
Oh yeah, yep, we're
Yeah,
good.
good,
We're
good,
good.
good. Okay. Murad, welcome back. Back in a few. Okay. So, we're starting now. Um, everything is
Thank you.
everything is connected in some way to everything else, but not necessarily linearly, or in a sense that the connection can be immediately discerned. What I try to do is to make these connections discernible and understood. And this evening I'm going to try and show one connecting point between everything as far as I see it. Okay, I just want to mention before we start the Copernican principle, which you might know is states that there's nothing special about the Earth or humans in the universe. That is, we are unimportant within the enormity of the cosmos. The concept of the observer, as I will show, is the opposite. The human is everything. Without the human being, there's no knowledge. This, of course, links to my contention that epistemology, knowledge, comes before ontology, existence, which we talked about last time. This is connected, but you don't have to worry if you weren't here last time. Well, you have to worry a bit, but not very much. Anyway, there is a two-way link between the observer and the observed. With everything connected to everything else, the observer is also the observed. The ubiquitous observer here represents the collapse of objectivity. Before you jump up and scream, I will explain as we go along. When everything observes everything, there's no outside. The outside would be another observer. Now, this is what I call subjective objectivity, which I will go in if we have time. Could everybody please put your cameras on? Thank you. The observer, by the way, has nothing to do with active consciousness. I'm always surprised when I read about the observer, and so many scientists somehow take it to connect it to active consciousness. It's very popular as a notion. I say the observer does not do. The observer perceives. The observer is a knowing recorder. The observer simply is. Um, I maintain that the observer is the bottom line, the fundamental upon which lies everything else. Not time, not space-time, not consciousness, not God. They exist only because there is an observer. Now, the observer effect is problematic since it means different things to different people. It commonly is taken to mean that human consciousness can actually influence where and when things happen. For example, in quantum mechanics, where and when particles are found. This, though, is untestable, since any so-called effect is seen when it is there, as we saw, as you know, with Schrödinger's cat. In other words, it is not the observer causing change from non-existence to existence, but rather it is knowledge that changes what wasn't before it was known to what is at the moment. It is clear then that is for the observer is epistemic, not ontological. It is not creation, but knowledge. It's strange that physics actually would add consciousness to its menu, since physics is usually about a third-person view of what is happening. In all that we've been discussing so far for ages, the most relevant concept is the observer, which we are. The question comes down to whether there is such a thing as an objective point of view when there is an observer. This is at the heart of everything we're discussing, from beliefs to religion to science and to everything in between. For something that is so seemingly innocuous, after all, an observer is supposedly and simply someone who observes, it turns out to be crazily complicated, depending as it does on one's view of objectivity. it's not actually clear what an observer is. It seems so many things to different people, and what he, I'm sorry, when I say he about the observer, I can't keep on saying he or she or it. So I'm going to say he, and I hope nobody minds. It's not actually clear what an observer is, what he does, or whether he does anything. Popularly nowadays, the observer does not affect that which is being observed. That is, it would happen without an observer. The objective observer, in other words. This is how the observer was typically considered in classical physics, as an external entity separate from the system under study, merely making observations and measurements and having no influence on the observed phenomena. Since then, the role of the observer has fluctuated. In the widest sense, there were always observers, of course. Somewhere, somehow, someone or something must be doing the observing. After all, we are only able to discuss things that are noticed. Over the ages, the metamorphosis of the observer has been gradual but radical, reflecting the changes in how important humans considered themselves to be and how relevant human conception in general was, particularly in the sciences and philosophy. Inevitably, the observer no longer was necessarily relied upon for an objective view of what was real, subsumed relativity. A central notion within Einstein's physics in the early 20th century, relativity, became commonly accepted as part and parcel of perception. Generally, almost everything observed was and is considered to be relative in relation to something else, so that relativity has become commonly synonymous with comparison. Relativity allowed the observer to have the cake and eat it too, to be objective and to be relatively so. Nowadays, the idea that everything is relative has been taken over as part of everyday thought and speech, so much so that the very perception by an observer is inexorably bound up with relativity. Now all actions are taken to be relative, and all objects are in relation to others. We intuitively feel that time is relative. We know that our movement is relative to something standing still. The conclusion could be that the observer has to some extent lost the sense of his own personal position in the scheme of things, his own purpose and selfhood, in fact. Since if we are all observers, it follows that everything is relative to and for each of us. This is why the common "it's all relative" is so ubiquitous and has become so popular, the popular seeming solution to many of our problems. It's one reason why fundamentals such as truth and fact and reality have lost the ability of being independently meaningful. If everything is relative, then nothing is specifically stable against which relativity occurs, and so is not even discussable. If then all of us are observers, who observes the observers? If we're all observers, there's nothing special about being an observer. An observer has in effect become a synonym for a person, bringing us back to the Copernican principle as to whether we are nothing special within a world where everyone is an observer among all observers. On the other hand, it could lead us to the assumption that there is an observer who observes these different observers. God, perhaps? The point is not that there are multiple observations leading to a consensus of what is taking place, but rather that each observer encompasses his own viewpoint of relativity at work. The observations are not, in other words, relative views of the same thing. There is no same thing. And no, Einstein did not say, quote, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Obviously, he didn't. It's one of those misinterpretations that happen often, which starts somewhere and then spreads like wildfire through the internet and so becomes fact. In which way, then, does an observer see things as relative? If I run faster than you, why would I think that my speed as being relative to yours? As far as I'm concerned, I'm faster than you are, while for you, you are slower than I am. We are part of the same event, even though seen from different perspectives. Surely, only someone else can consider me and you having different speeds relative to each other. So while the relativity of objects applies to a relationship between them, they are relative to each other only according to an observer. Relativity without an observer outside of the participants in an event makes no sense. The Earth circles the Sun. It does so only for an observer of the Earth and the Sun. I on Earth see the Sun moving. I don't see both the Earth and the Sun moving round each other. To see that, I would have to be somewhere observing both. I would then be the observer. This, in fact, is the observer in Einstein's special theory of relativity, in which only the observer could witness relativity as such. We can take this further. Nothing happens or is even noticed if there isn't anything to measure it against, i.e. compare it to. There would be no time if things didn't change, and of course no change without time. And if there were no scale of measurement, there'd be no way to distinguish between before and after, or large and small, as these terms are defined in relation to specific scales of reference which are themselves determined and set up by human beings. Nothing happens without an observer. Nothing happens without an observer. An observer could be a proxy observer, so we are told, such a measurement device, actualized when read by a human being and translated for convenience into scales of measurement. What would body temperature even mean if there was no scale spreading out from what is marked as normal? Those taking part in the event itself are more appropriately participants. A participant is an actor or action in an event, while the observer is separated from the participant and action in that event. The participant's clock does not go more slowly or faster no matter how fast is moving. The clocks moving at different rates depending on the participant's speed and location move at those different rates only for an observer. In other words, time is relative for an observer's position only. Now, while there is a difference between an observer and an event and a participant in the event, there is nevertheless a common denominator: knowledge, awareness that the event occurred. The implication that things are not really there unless they're observed equates existence with knowledge. To observe something is to be aware of it. Both the observer and the participants are aspects of knowledge. Rather than objects having discrete independent existence, a chair, an atom, a person, reality is relational, where nothing exists except in relation to something else. Existence, in other words, must be of at least two things. There is no number one on its own. At the very least, there has to be knowledge of it, i.e. an observer. You kind of, by the way, have failed to notice from everything I've said so far that the observer is ultimately human. This is not what physicists generally contend, though. For physics, the observer has lost his humanness, since it is effectively a theoretical construct, a reference point, a coordinate system, a measurement protocol. Physicist Carlo Rovelli says that an object has property only when it reacts with something else, along the lines of Einstein's point that without objects there would be no space, as against Newton, who accepted the possibility of empty space. But Rovelli then makes the point that something else does not have to be human. It could rather be the interaction of systems, for example. Cosmologist Thomas Hertog goes further when he states that, of course, such quantum observations don't need to be carried out by humans. The environment, or even a single particle, can observe. From that point of view, knowledge is not part of the picture. If it were, there would be no knowledge without there would be knowledge without a knower. Reducing humans to insignificance, or at least not being particularly necessary, seems to be the general opinion among physicists. So Sabina Hossenfelder takes it for granted that, quote, we don't need an observer to make a measurement. All you need to make a measurement is an apparatus. But who sets up the apparatus? And who does something with the measurement when it appears? For Rovelli, measurement devices and scientists are all part of nature, and that one part of nature is in relationship to any other part of nature. There isn't anything, he says, that exists in itself independently from something else. Yet, the fact that parts of nature affect each other does not abrogate the fact that parts of nature exist together as singular organisms, each with its own internal organization that can be identified and studied. It would then be more realistic to claim that the relationship is not between parts of nature, but rather between them and us, the observer, the knower. Not all relationships are relative. They become relative for an observer. Ravelli, by the way, Ravelli is also mindful of that when he asks, what does quantum theory tell us about what happens in another galaxy? So he's actually disagreed with everything he's said before. What does it tell us? Is exactly what I'm asking. If it doesn't tell us anything, there's nothing happening. The strange notion that objects exist because they react to each other, but without this being known about, presupposes the presence of some sort of will consciousness or soul, as it would be called in religious terms, in parts of nature. It would be more accurate to claim, rather starkly, that things are in relation to other things only when there is an observer, as I keep on saying. For theoretical physics, the observer then is a somewhat inaccurate term due to the human implicatory meaning, where its purpose is supposedly fulfilled, whether the observer is a mechanical device or a particular mathematical context from which events and objects are evaluated. This actually would be going even beyond the Copernican principle, in which humans are minute, infinitesimally small within the cosmos. What we have instead is the elimination of the human as being necessary at all. But how could observation work when divorced entirely from the human element? Surely, until relativity is witnessed by a human being through the inertial reference frame, there's no one to know that the events occurred. The buck stops here with a human. To put it bluntly, there are no results until they have been witnessed by a human. To put it even more bluntly, nothing will have occurred without a human observer. Nothing would have occurred. To that extent, we are each of us observers. It follows from that somewhat audacious statement that there is always only one observer. The buck stops with each one of us, in fact, each one of us. Yes, but what about the observer itself? Without something to observe, does the observer exist? It's a false question, since the observer will always be aware of his own existence. That is, will observe himself at the very least. The elimination of the self-observed would be a state of nothing. That is the state of non-existence. Non-existence, the unobservable, is impossible because there is no self to do the non-observing. By the way, if you want to see more of this, have a look at my book, Nothing Matters, a book about nothing, when I go into that nothing. So it always comes down to the observer, and therein lies the tale, the difference between the observer and an observer. What a difference that makes. Are we part of the universe, an observer, or is the universe part of us, the observer? As mentioned, our time is ours only. Time for us as individuals is the time and does not change its rate no matter how fast we travel. It slows down, which I already mentioned, or speeds up for other individual observers. The significance of the observer is all-encompassing. Now, if you were in a spacecraft traveling through space and there was no observer other than you, what would you be traveling relative to? The answer is you wouldn't be traveling relative to anything. As unintuitive as it sounds, you would in effect not be moving at all. Normally, though, spacecraft's progress in deep space is indicated by instruments on board. They are measuring motion relative to something, be it stars, galaxy, or far-off celestial objects, or cosmic microwave background. So that instruments can serve as reference points for navigation. But if there were no instruments to indicate motion, there would be no frame of reference at all, and hence the spacecraft would not be in motion. With no apparent change, there would not be the notion of time passing either. Inevitably, the observer is always in the picture. In all our consideration of something happening, or indeed of emptiness, we realize that there is always something in order for there to be something else. In other words, there can never be the absence of everything. However much is deleted, we are always left with an observer, each of us. Without an observer, as I mentioned, there be no movement, no objects, no time, no anything. In essence, without observers, there wouldn't be anything to discuss because there would be no discussers to do so. The fact that we encounter everything after it has happened leads to a natural conclusion that all clocks in the universe are slower than our individual personal clock. Thank you for that, Terry. So it's not just that each of us has our individual and unique time, that we, you, me, each of us individually, are each in possession of the fastest clock in the universe. Each of us has the only time there is. Looking at it this way, each of us is the center of the universe. Putting it more bombastically, the entire universe is focused on each of us. It was Walt Whitman who wrote that the whole theory of the universe is directed unerringly at a single individual, naming you. And it was Schrödinger who made the observation that this life of yours, which you are living, is not merely a piece of the entire existence, but it is, in a certain sense, the whole. The point is that an observer is always the observer, and that observer is each of us. The observer then can never be anything but subjective, perceiving events through his own perspective. This doesn't mean that observers are unaware that there are other observers in the world, and that those others have their own views. But being aware of this does not take away from each observer the sureness that his point of view is an objective one. There is no real point of view other than one's own. Relativity is per se subjective. But the knowledge that time is individual and so seemingly objective, we are also aware that others' knowledge is objective to them. And before somebody comes up with this puts pay to the claim that I am describing solipsism. I'm obviously not. There are other minds, and we know it. The observer derives his centrality from knowledge. I would talk about John Wheeler, but I won't. I don't think I have time. When Lee Smolin proposes reality without observers, he points out that he is a realist, and that for him the goal of science is precisely the description of nature as it would be in our absence. But we need to ask what a description of nature, in fact any description, is if there's no describer and no one to see or hear the description. And let's face it, science doesn't have goals. Scientists do. Epistemology is often dismissed offhand rather than scientific realism. Roger Penrose puts forward the thought scenario of a rocket passing a distant planet that had the same physical features as the Earth, including weather. Now, since weather on Earth is influenced by events caused by human actions and observations, Penrose points out that weather on a planet where humans had never inhabited demonstrates that there are physical events which occur without human consciousness. This proves, he maintains, that the observer is irrelevant. However, his observation, and I use the word advisedly, is not valid, since when photographs from the rocket are examined, it is then that human consciousness comes to play. To put it simply, nothing can be observed without somebody doing the observer, that is, being known about. The observer and epistemology, in other words. If I have proposed reality is the result of knowledge, there would necessarily be more than one reality. Not reality, but realities. With reality being in the eyes of the beholder, the observer, each one of us, the outcome is a range of realities, several models of reality, all mathematically sound, but often burdened by gaps and even contradictions between models, rather than the reality sought after by physicists and philosophers and almost everybody else. Reality is what is, when each is individual, less subjectively objective. I'll finish off with this from John Searle. On being asked in one interview what it was like to be a philosopher, John Searle replied, "It's murder, absolutely. You get up in the morning, there's a large brick wall, you run your head against that brick wall, and you keep doing that every day until you make a hole in the wall." To which I add that each observer who makes a hole in the wall makes a different hole. So each one who comes after starts off with a different holed wall. And that's it for today, folks. Did I do it in time? Yeah, not bad. Would you lot please put on your cameras, please? Nobody's taking a blind bit of notice of me. I'm the observer here. I'm observing no cameras. Right. I see people object. How strange. I didn't think anybody object to any of that. Okay. Please put your cameras in, everybody. Okay. Alan, go for it. Go for me. I'm ready.
Thanks for that, Ron. I think I differ with you a bit.
Bless
You
Christ.
may or may not find some of this a friendly amendment, but I'm a bit of a fan of Ian hacking, and one of the distinctions that hacking makes is between observing and doing. And I think that what you're talking about is primarily observing, although I think that a lot of what we know is a function of doing, and so I'm wondering whether you might amend your view of observing to include the realm also of doing.
No.
No.
What?
Well, that's simple.
What?
Uh,
But but 1 second after I said no, I just want to say something. I mentioned very briefly because everything had to be very, very brief. Um, I don't like the word observer, maybe for the same reason that you don't. I think observing means you have to actually see it, observe. That's not what's meant. I would prefer to use the knower, maybe, with a K, rather than observer. In that,
yeah, nowhere is getting closer.
yeah,
It's
no, no,
getting closer.
I
I
know what
think
you mean. I know what you
um,
mean.
that for example, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about uh, uh, the what's called the evanescent field. You have an electric potential, and you have stuff that's very close to the surface, and you have stuff that's farther away. Well, we live and we observe things in the far field. We don't observe things in the near field. Atoms are in the near field, and we don't observe them. And so it's it how do we determine things in the near field? Well, we use things like scanning microscopes, or scanning tunneling microscopes, I should say, and we can observe things down there, and we can start observing things that are smaller than what we can phenomenally see. And so that's part of the reason why I'm suggesting that doing is important. that it's not only it's not only observing. Observing is kind of limited.
What do you mean by doing, which is different from what I said? What do you what do you mean about doing? I mean, why?
Well, doing here would require some apparatus if you're going to look at the near field.
Yeah,
You would
okay.
need something like a scanning tunneling microscope.
Yeah, but you would need somebody to look at it, which is the point of what
You
I've been
would need
saying.
someone to look at it. Yes, that's true.
Oh,
That
that's
is true. And so that's why I was asking whether you would consider that a friendly amendment.
no, because no, because because somebody's got to look. Somebody's got to look at the microscope. If nobody looks at the microscope, it's not there. How do you know something's there unless you? And I don't like the word observe, but that was you see what I mean? We
Well,
only
you're
know
a little bit more idealistic than I am.
possibly, possibly. Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Come back
Yeah,
to
you're
it.
welcome.
You want Michael? Hi.
Hi. So if I have objections, then my objections are subjective and relative. So to begin with, the buck stops here with me, not with humans, with me.
Yep.
Because for me, it's I am the only observer of the world.
Yep.
And you cannot easily dismiss solipsism because it's entirely consistent with all my feelings and all my experience. It's there are no logical reasons to say that solipsism is wrong.
I'm surprised that you that I especially mentioned something, but I knew that somebody would come and blame me for that.
But bear with me. So for me, it's just a starting point. Okay.
Okay.
So now, if I just take my experience seriously, I see it looks like there are, as a minimum, other things that look similar to me, which we call humans. And if I assume that they are really similar to me, what follows from this that I am not the only observer, that I have to assign the same status to them. And this interpretation is also consistent. And so I basically can choose which one I believe. And so my choice, as I assume probably your choice as well, is that there are other observers other than me. Because if not, so I may be wrong. But if not, then the discussion is over. So there is nothing in this world. But if there are other observers, then we can talk to each other. We can derive some common understanding of what we call knowledge of the world, and then we can discuss this knowledge. So to me, this interpretation of my experience, it seems more interesting and richer than just solipsist interpretation. And so I assume that there is something in this interpretation and in our common knowledge. And now in our common knowledge as it stands now, and I'm talking about physics, so I'm more familiar with physics than with philosophy. And in physical theories of the day, the observer is really ubiquitous. Because we cannot understand either relativity theory or quantum theory without observers. But these observers, they are understood differently and play the different role. So in relativity theory, using Einstein's own like popular account of this theory, it's all about rulers and clocks. So you don't need a physical human observer or at each and every reference frame. You just need the rulers and clocks. That's it. And assuming that somehow you can compare the readings of these instruments. So human observers in this picture are not needed really, because the picture assumes the classical notion of physical events, that these physical events exist regardless whether we have someone who observes these events. So if the clock, the pointer is at 2 p.m., that's it. It's 2 p.m. It does not matter whether you have a human who interprets this as 2 p.m. Pacific time, for instance. But in quantum theory, it becomes more interesting because you don't have this independent interpretation of these events without another system directly involved and interacting with the system that you are trying to investigate. And this makes it very easy to introduce this implied notion of a conscious human observer who is doing this measurement. But an alternative interpretation is what is known as quantum Darwinism, that you don't need a human observer. You just need a big system which is big enough, classical in this sense, and there are just objectively some states of quantum systems that are more stable, and they are called pointing states in this quantum Darwinism approach. And when you put this system in interaction with another quantum system, then you have this convergence almost always to one of these pointing states. And this is what a human observer can detect as a measurement.
Can I interrupt you here for a second? Because first of all, you keep on saying what you need is, which is precisely what I've been saying, what we need. Everything you've said did not count if nobody knows. You tell me that it's 2 o'clock. It's not 2 o'clock nowhere. It's 2 o'clock when one knows it's 2 o'clock. How can somebody not know it's 2 o'clock? Where does this come in? That's the because you keep on saying what you need, and I agree. We need. We.
Well, this is where it is coming. So this is a pointer which points now at a specific place in.
Yeah, I know. I can see it. That's the
right?
point. I can see it.
And so the fact that this is 2 o'clock, this is your interpretation. But the fact that you have this physical state of a pointer pointing at certain place or certain point, that's objective in classical physics.
How can it be objective if nobody knows about it?
It does not matter.
Really?
It's just a physical state, which in classical physics it exists regardless of the observer.
Well, that's exactly my point. That I can't see.
And if you tell me that this is not consistent with quantum physics, I agree. It is not. But relativity theory, in this sense, it's still classical theory. So you can assume that there is this objective states that a physicist can interpret in certain way, but with or without physicist, this is still an objective state.
I can't. I personally cannot accept an objective state that is not known. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I'm just describing
I know, but
approach of classical physics, which is currently we understand its limitations. But
I know, but I don't have to agree with that. I'm not a realist. We'll have to do a meeting on realism and anti-realism. I don't go for it. But I mean, it's fair enough. I mean, I know physicists go for it. I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm kind of come back to solipsism later because
okay, but I have more to say about this, but I feel that I already used too much time.
You please, you can come back. But can I, Josh?
All right.
Sorry, Michael, but you can come back. It's okay. Sorry. Josh, would you mind if I let somebody who hasn't been on before in before you, like Tone, for example? Tone, is okay
sure.
with you?
Thank
you. Thank you very much, Tone. Thanks to
Um,
Josh.
Thanks. I'll let folks go before me. I've been here before and I host a
You've
lot
been
of
here
stuff.
before.
So
Are you sure?
I'll let some folks. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sure. I'm sure.
Okay, I've got such nice people here. It's amazing. But okay, Josh,
Okay.
go for it.
Yeah. Actually, I'm in sympathy with you, Ron, concerning the unsatisfactory nature of leaving things at sort of the physical notion of the objective, because I think that begs the question of how the kinds of presuppositions that go into our notions of the objective, and they involve taking it back to a subjective rationality, whether you think of that in terms of epistemology or not. Otherwise, the concept of objectivity needs that, even if it's sort of hidden. And all we're doing is talking about what is objectively out there, and we pretend that the people that are involved in actually setting up the criteria for objectivity are not part of the picture. They have to be a part of the picture, and according to the very assumptions that are embedded within the notions of objectivity, or the ones that tend to be associated with classical physics. But given that, that brings us back to, and then going back to your spiel at the beginning, it brings us back to notions from 200 years ago, which I think basically encompass a lot of the basis of modern physics, and that is what came out of German idealism. I mean, much of what I heard and what you were saying it has been taken up by German idealists, well, beginning with Kant and then up through Hegel and Schelling. The idea of there having to be an observer that represents the world. In Schelling, Schelling brings in nature. It says nature is a part of it. It's not just us representing nature. Nature is just a whole bunch of mechanical stuff. Everything is a part of this becoming, and that becoming means that objects in relation to other objects and in relation to we who are observing it are always in a state of flux. That is to say, because you always have this, this is the sort of relativism that maintains within the world, in terms of the relations among aspects of the world. But then it's brought back to a unifying factor, and that's the subject. And you seem to also make that argument. That's what the observer is for you. It's a subject, and it's a rational subject. You call it epistemological, but I think it implies that epistemology rests on a metaphysics, and it's an idealist metaphysics of the subject that, even though everything that it observes in a relativistic way, that it's relative to other people's observations, but the person within themselves, you assume is unified, and that leads to questions about what does it take to be an observer? Does it take being a human? I mean, that was the implication I got, that you would exclude other animals from those capabilities. But so what are the, first of all, what are those capabilities required that are unique to humans? Number one. Number two, are they emergent features that emerge evolutionarily from other species? Next question is, are we, what would be considered within the criterion for proper knowledge observation? Is it only something that is connected with what science does? Does a musician or an artist or a dancer or a poet, are they excluded from this when they're involved in their craft? What about different states of consciousness that we're in? If we're sleepy or drunk or something, is there just a normative ideal of particular people and particular circumstances doing particular things that qualifies as proper observation? And then I wanted to follow that up by let me just throw one last point, is that beyond German idealism, what put German idealism into question was questioning that rationalist beginning. So with Schopenhauer and then with Kierkegaard, you had a shift away from rational and epistemological knowledge towards drives and the unconscious and the irrational. And so the focus there was on feeling and on the subjective, rather as being a grounding for knowledge. Whereas you seem to be beginning, the ground floor for you seems to be knowledge. It seems to be the rational. So these are the presuppositions that I hear that are classically German idealists that I hear in your position. It's about knowledge. It's about subjective knowledge. And it's about rationality. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Josh. I never thought of myself as an idealist, actually, because I'm not saying it's all in the mind. I'm talking about epistemology, which is that in order for something to happen, it has to be known. Otherwise, it's just not happening. I can't see. I just can't see, conceive of something that's happening that I don't know about. It's just not happening for me. That's it. I can't see any way around it. And as far as solipsism is concerned, I am well aware that other people think differently from me. I'm aware of that. I know I'm not the only person here. I know I'm the only one that has the source of the way I am, but I know that other people have their sources, and I accept it. And the fact that we are similar to other people, which is vaguely true. We are not exactly the same as any other person in the world. Exactly the same. We're not. We can't be. But that's my answering backhandedly to Michael, by the way. Anyway, thank you, Josh. Carry on walking. I'm getting my monthly exercise. My idealistic exercise.
Walk you into the ground today. Watch it.
Oh, I'm tired already. Okay. Richard. Hi there. Welcome back.
Good evening. I was glad to see that Josh seemed to have changed the background, because I was getting, sort of feeling that he might be a bit tired walking over the same space all the time. I could see exactly what he meant, I think, but I'm not sure I come from quite the same point. I must admit that normally I just speak off the top of my head and try and remember anything, but I made a few notes as you went along tonight. I think you've raised so many more questions in my mind. I haven't got any answers, but as I understand it, you were saying, and yes, I've got to thank you, because I hadn't really tried to put together quantum physics and philosophy and religious theory until you raised this, but it seems to me you've caught them all together in a mishmash, and that where you're leading, back in the 1980s, early 1980s, I think it was, I read a book called The Dancing Woolly Masters. Well, actually, I don't think I ever finished it because it annoyed me so much I put it down and I don't know where it is. But and it was sort of tying physics and mysticism together, Eastern mysticism together. And it seems to me that it's invariable. You have said, basically, I think, that nothing's defined in a defined state of being until it's being observed by something else. And until something is observed, it's got infinite possibility or probability. It could be anything until it's observed, and then it becomes fixed.
No, I
It can
didn't
take
go.
on any conceivable form.
I didn't go that far.
Well, okay, it was implied, I think. Look, okay, maybe I've broken the law of excluded middle and jumped a little bit to what I saw you were saying, rather than actually basing it all on everything. But
no, what you're saying is very, very important, by the way, very important, because there's a hell of a difference between my saying it can be anything to my saying it isn't anything. I'm not saying it has millions of possibilities. I'm not. I'm saying it just isn't. That's it.
okay, so possibly my conclusion from that you were saying that binary logic doesn't apply, that it's got to be fuzzy logic, doesn't apply otherwise either then, because it was based on what I thought you were saying there. But I still suspect that you are going towards fuzzy logic, probabilities, and if once you go into that, there must be infinite probabilities ahead. But anyway, okay, what you said also made me think of, if you have reality with a small r, it means something different to reality with a big R, a capital R, or the word with a capital R and word as we use it normally. The word with a capital R tends to mean it is applying to holy word and so on. Is the observer also a capital O and a small o, in which case you are going into mysticism, because the observer, he, she, it, whatever, implies something, some state of consciousness that is capable of existing outside the reality we exist in to observe. If you are implying that. Okay, basically, it did make me chuckle a bit, because you actually reminded me of Sartre in Being and Nothingness. There's a look. If I'm peering through a keyhole and then I notice someone else watching me, so I'm being observed rather than observing what's going on in the other room, then that challenges my own sense of self and how I control my view of the world, because I am actually being watched by somebody else. Okay, this possibly goes towards Hegel's master-slave dialectic, but I'm not absolutely sure, because I don't remember anything much about it. But I know master-slave when it's computers, but master-slave and Hegel, I can't remember. I did read a bit of Hegel a long, long time ago. Okay, if you go to systems analysis, I have both been the observed and the observer. And there's something called the Hawthorne effect, where humans, if they're observed, behave differently to if they're not observed, which makes it very difficult for a poor systems analyst who's trying to analyze how they do things, because they're aware of that. It's well known. Something that I hadn't realized before I started doing a little bit of research about this, I mean, my programming, obviously, I gave up as soon as I retired anyway, and I haven't bothered with it. But apparently you can actually find that you have a sort of Hawthorne effect on computer bugs. If you run sort of debuggers, monitoring programs and so on, I just don't understand. I mean, but maybe it's because my programming skills weren't there, and I mostly programmed in Prolog rather than in modern imperative languages. But apparently the process's behavior can alter. Now this, I still, as I said, I just don't see how, but apparently running a debugger can alter the way that, well, anyway, I will leave that to people who are more up to date in modern programming, but apparently so. Pity I can't ask. I've got a cousin or somebody who was rather expert in that area. Apparently those bugs that change behavior are called Heisenbugs, which I rather like, for the obvious reasons. Okay. What else did I think? So conventionally, you've got a separate observer. I tended to think this, it's the way that I think, that if you consider that someone writes, a writer I've forgotten who it was. It's been put forward that the writer's always an outsider from the normal social conventions, because you have to observe what's going on to be able to write it. But a writer is involved then in his work. And so the observer has become totally involved in the model of the universe that he's inhabiting. But then you have editorial perspective, which as a writer yourself, you're aware of, where you have to look outside. You're no longer looking at your own arguments as yourself. You're trying to look at it from someone else. So you've got the writer as an observer, first having observed whatever they write about and then putting forward their arguments or creating their novel or putting forward their poem. And then you've got the editorial perspective that comes later, that maybe the writer themselves or maybe an editor from outside, but someone else looking at it to see what's wrong with it and how to shape it and how to cut it. I mean, I'm sure you're aware that T.S. Eliot's Wasteland was twice as long before it was edited, and it became a much better poem for being edited. And I'm only too aware that back when I used to write a bit of poetry, if only I'd had somebody who could cut out large areas, some of my poems would have been a lot better. Okay. Basically, who is the observer anyway when you describe it? Is it the eye of me observing you? You did have a bit of nominative determination in this at the beginning, when you kept on saying, please turn on your cameras, and people were disappearing and appearing. And, it was because we were talking about the other and who's the observer. We couldn't see people, and then they disappeared. Oh, anyway, you get what I'm talking about. I can see you smiling. Okay, is the observer and the observed, is it a reflection of yourself anyway? Are you looking at yourself in a mirror? Could be. How do you work out from that? I've got a few more ideas.
The only thing I can say about the mirror is we have no idea what we look like. This is completely subjective.
Do we ever know in the mirror that we actually are, that reflection is us?
No, that's what I just said. No,
Yes,
I mean, we know it's us. We just don't know how anybody else sees us. We can only see what we see subjectively.
Yeah. Yes, what I'm saying is, yes, we see what we see, but we don't see what other people. Okay, if I jump from that, it seems to me the basic question, you were describing it from physics, which, as I said, I'm not a physicist, and I don't really follow it, and I haven't really looked at it very much for years anyway. But philosophically, you're describing whether monism, dualism, or pantheism, not necessarily with a God there, but is the whole universe one consciousness? Or is it two? Is it thought and matter? Or is it infused with everything? Because basically, the way you were going, it's either got to be dualist, because, the observer, there has to be somebody, there has to be an observer observing something, or everything, all living matter would have to be one consciousness. Or whatever. As I said, I think, to me, you have made me more muddled than I was before, but at least you've made me open my mind to some of the things that are going on in this area, which I wasn't aware of. I'm stopping there.
I'm delighted I got somebody muddled. That's my aim in life, to get you all muddled up. You come out different from when you came in.
I really think that, I like thinking. It really made me try to work out what you were saying and put it together. But the trouble is, my brain is getting old. Most of us looking at us, you're all getting.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you. Very interesting. Kerry.
Okay, so, I think the problem that Richard might have been having is he's trying to draw conclusions. And I think that's a problem from the starting point that you're using. So I'm going to try to recapitulate what you said and simplify this, and tell me if I get this right or if I'm completely off base.
You're completely off base.
Oh, I didn't even start yet. Jeez. Okay. The observer only exists via experience. which is another way, Alan had a point when he was talking about verbs versus nouns. In other words, experiencing equals existence. Okay? Put another way, experiencing equals knowing, right? If to know is to experience, then experiencing equals knowing. And that's basically it, right? If you're looking for the fundamental original starting point for everything, it's experiencing. There is experiencing. Everything else follows from that. And when Michael was talking about objective states and classical physics, et cetera, all that's narratives. That comes way later. That's when we try to construct some kind of reality from this experiencing. I mean, we don't even know what's doing it. We have this sense of self, but that's another construction that comes later. How'd I do so far?
You're doing well.
Okay. And the last thing I'll end on, because I'm going to keep this short.
Good lad.
The problem with language, you're talking about mirrors. It's kind of like showing somebody a mirror with a mirror. There's a huge problem with that because the words aren't the thing. Thanks.
Yep. Good point. Good point. Thank you very much, Kerry. Thank you. And you were short. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we've got two Williams here. Which one of you is gonna? Is it the young one or the slightly older one's gonna talk?
Pick me the gray hair guy.
Ah, okay, fair enough.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
My take on the conversation is that it's an extension of last week's or last time's notion that you developed, and I thought very brilliantly, the difference between inside and outside. Because the inside and outside is really another way of casting the notion of observer and observed. And I think in another way, too, it's the same distinction that we see in the distinction between form and content. In other words, the observer supplies the form of the content it gets through its perceptions, right? Isn't that right?
Yeah.
All right. So we have a situation here where we're talking about simple relations that are correlative relationships, aren't we? We're saying that you have a form and content question if you have an observer and observer, because the observer is the provider of the form of the content. Isn't that right?
Yes.
All right. So if that's true, then the relationship of observer and to observed is a question of correlatives there too. And that seems to me an important insight because what we're talking about is simply a relationship of how knowledge comes about. And it's always a convergence of something inside the head of the observer and the world that he perceives or she perceives. And if that's the case, isn't the question of all the surrounding questions of physics, which I don't understand at all, and the rest of it, kind of collateral? It's really a question of form and content and how it works and where it comes from. And that's really a question of what the function of the observer and the observed is doing, and inside and outside. And I think it's a nice tie together for me to see them all connected here. And thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering why you're talking, because obviously for me, the observed is not as important as the observer. It can't be, because that's outside.
And I agree with that too. I agree with that too. The observer is the form. He gives the form to the content.
Yeah.
And the content comes from the world, and he is the creator of the content and the understanding that is reached, the knowledge that is gone, and the activities that follow it. Yes?
Yeah. Yes, it's an interesting point. So I think that's where the mirror comes in as well. Because when you're the observed, it's not there's a problem here. I just realized the observed is not as important as the observer, because the observed is merely observed. Although the observed is also is also an observer at some point. In fact, in every point. So inside and outside are very mixed up and very interesting. By the way, thank you for bringing that up. It's very interesting. Thank you, Bill. Terry,
Hello.
good to see you.
Well, good to be here. Alan Katzelmeier, I had no idea that macrophages were involved in tympanic membrane repair. That's fascinating. I thought they were strictly part of the immune system. So if that makes no sense to anyone else, my apologies. I just had to look them up real quick. So also the fact that the signaling thing is a I don't know how you pronounce it, vanilla-ish detector makes me wonder about the role of vanilla in general. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it's such an attractive flavor. It's deep in the protein structure. I did not expect that. Ron, you mentioned earlier about I have to revise a statement I made to you, I think at the coffee shop years ago. I used to think that everybody else was slower in time, but that is just not physically correct. It's an overextension of the symmetries. And what actually happens is if you're in a spaceship and you look straight forward and you're going to the Andromeda Galaxy, it moves faster, not slower. It is the standard statement is simply not correct, and that's experimentally not correct. The reason we get in these quandaries about it is the principle is so sacred that people just ignore the data. And this is not subtle data. This goes in GPS satellites have to follow this data. But they just kind of ignore it and say, well, something that doesn't matter, that's just blue shift, blah, blah, blah. But blue shift is time shift also. So if you see a galaxy in front of you blue shifted, it's going faster in time than you are. And this is a real problem in the interpretation of special relativity. So I used to think that, and I believe I remember saying that to you, that everybody goes slower. But what happens is everybody that moves from your frame moves slower. So if you launch a particle, it will always go slower.
Okay.
And that symmetry is absolute. But if you're the one who was launched, then you have to take history into account. You cannot just ignore it. So this is getting quite mathematical at this point. I'm using actual phase shifts with an imaginary complex plane to rewrite that part of special relativity because it is not interpreted correctly despite the data on that. And the fact that there are simple phase shifts is just fascinating because I never expected it to come out as a phase shift. It almost looks like quantum mechanics. So you just have a central phase rotation into the conversion to find the new setting, and then you have to project into whichever plane you're going from. But I think that's a fascinating area. I think there's going to be some interesting opportunities for reinterpretation of things that we have been sloppy about in the past. So aside from that, Michael, I was glad to see you were talking about clocks and rulers. I love clocks and rulers. Clocks and rulers. Got to actually have devices because you can talk about abstract space all you want to, except for one thing. If it's empty space, you can't measure it because it's empty. It's kind of like duh, if there's nothing there, how do you detect anything in it? And Einstein always, up until 1911, used clocks and rulers, clocks and rulers. And then there's just a fascinating bit of history. Minkowski died after he just insulted him and all this stuff. And he switched hard to Minkowski's representation. And all of a sudden, his clocks and rulers disappeared, which is unfortunate because he predicted the time paradox of twin paradox using clocks and rulers. So he had that. So, and I think I've drifted off too much already. So
No. It goes back to what I said. Einstein used clocks and rulers, but there was Einstein looking at it.
Yes,
it wasn't magic. It was looked at, and he used it. That's the only point I made.
Yeah,
there has to be a human being doing something.
And one of the things that goes on with this, like in the structure of time and space itself, you can't isolate the final contact point, the observer. You just can't. Anything else, if you talk about something at a distance, someone said like 4 seconds in the past is true. It was some kind of delay. We're all hearing each other a little bit delayed, probably not quite that much. But we have these delays in circuits, and everything at a distance is uncertain, and that introduces uncertainty into what happened when, where. But the only way you get that to collapse into something that means something is an observer. You have to actually touch it. You have to have, and not just a non-remote observer either. You have to actually make contact. If you get light from the distant galaxy, once that light hits you, you've observed it. Whatever happened ain't going to unhappen. It happened. And this is a point that people miss on the relativity issue, is that once you get the information, it's solid. And you can talk about relativity in other senses, but not that one. And but as long as it's got a distance, you also have this thing where you don't know what the final conclusion is going to be. So somehow as observers, we pull it all together. And Ron, even after all these years, they don't fully understand how you reconcile the idea of multiple observers without having some kind of physics in between. Because if you accept the idea that other people are observer, you accept the idea that I'm an observer, and that James Cook is an observer, and then Frank is an observer. Somehow or other, it has to be something kind of between us that allows that kind of multiple existence to be there. So I wonder, it feels like there could be a way where you could accommodate both viewpoints, because without the observer, yeah, there's nothing there. But if you have multiple observers, then obviously there's a continuity that goes on with that. So
I agree. That's the wonderful part of it, as far as I can see, that there are multiple observers and they see things not exactly the same, and um, it's it's not exact. Everybody's seeing something slightly different, but and altogether it makes what we call common knowledge, which is not really common, but it's good enough for people to say, yes, I understand that, even if it might not be exactly the same as what somebody else thinks. It's like language. We understand each other, even though it's approximate, and we do it well. That's how I see multiple observers, which is not solipsism. That's the point.
no. And that's there's a concept going on there that I just find fascinating, because it's the idea of emergence in physics, the idea that things become more complex or that something comes out of it, the idea of multiple observers, the fact that it can be different ways that combine together, seems to be part of how we get a universe where information exists, where history exists. I don't accept those as givens. Not, in fact, boy, I've gotten hard in the other direction. You can have a universe with change, but information is precious. It's unique, it's unusual, and it involves observers. And if we underestimate the importance of that, if we just accept these things as givens and say, someone mentioned Max Tegmark. One of the problems I have with Max Tegmark is he always says mathematics is just pre-existent, the Platonic ideal.
Yeah.
I've never seen mathematics exist without an observer.
Yeah.
I've never seen a concept of math exist without an observer. Those are complicated concepts. Even the concept of one is a lot more complicated and observer-ish
Yeah.
than I think we tend to think, because there's
Hold on, no, wait, hold on. But six is 270. So minus 270 minus 45.
Wait.
270 minus 45. That's what you want.
Is that was someone talking to me, or somebody got their microphone on accidentally?
Accidentally, he left.
I think that was accident. I thought he was
accidentally. I threw him out.
Oh,
That was a Zoom bomber, Kerry.
Was that a Zoom bomber?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, I didn't even understand what he was saying, so I don't know.
How did he get in?
You're hard to say.
I tried everything.
Who was it?
You've done well.
So far,
Ron, we go back. We know how bad it can get.
We don't want to think about that.
Oh yeah, okay. That was a minor one. That was a minor one. But yeah, this whole observer thing, I think physics needs to get into this idea of emergent, interactive creation of information. You can call that observation, sort of, but it's certainly related. And information is kind of like the ultimate creation of physics. So if you start out like folks like Tegmark do and just assume that it's a given, you're just going to get a proliferation of everything. You get this everything all at once, all the time, is the inevitable result of assuming that these things are givens. Now, if you instead assume that information and observation are emergent, precious, and rare, wow, it really makes a difference on how you go about interpreting some of the deeper infrastructure. And I think the deeper infrastructure gets much more interesting at that point. It's also hard to represent.
Yep.
How do you do physics and when space and time are emergent instead of being givens? But we have to go that route because any inertial system, I don't say this vaguely anymore, any inertial system has its own local definition of those, and only that system has those definitions. That's how tight the observer thing is. So it gets interesting. And I think there's beautiful things to explore in physics on this line. So I'll shut up with that.
No, thank you very much, Terry. Very, very interesting what you said. Very interesting. Frank, good to see you.
Hi, yeah, good to be seen. Um, yeah, actually, Terry touched on a lot of the things that I was curious about. I'm just following your notion about different observers. You know, I think you're kind of saying I'm really trying to understand this notion that I believe that you're feeling, Ron, that there's an external reality doesn't exist without an observer. Uh, so you get an observer who kind of instantiates or makes something real, creates an approximation of that thing that's out there.
Wait,
My,
no, hang on. Sorry.
maybe that's what I'm thinking. Maybe that's not what you're thinking.
No,
Oh,
it isn't, but it's okay. Carry on. No,
okay.
tell me to think that that's what I'm thinking because I'm not, but carry on. That's good.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm trying to differentiate, what I'm thinking. I do, I have this feeling that there's an external reality that exists, that, we're very primitive beings that have very primitive tools to observe reality. So the best we can do is make an approximation of what's out there. And I know as a person who's next to me, maybe observing the same external reality and has their approximation of it. And I know that for me, that there's a personal benefit for me to communicate with that person to see about how we can refine our approximations about what's out there so that we can benefit from that. Whether it's just for personal meaning or for monetary gain or whatever, to invent something or to at least to understand something there. Now, if I don't observe that external reality, now I'm just laying out what I think. I know that you don't. Well, I don't. I think you don't, but I want to hear what you have to say. I think that I believe that when I don't look at the external world, or when I don't think about, the Big Bang, or, the really big things or the really small things, when I don't think about them, I believe that they still exist. I just don't care, right? If I'm not there as an observer, it makes no difference to me whether they exist or not. I think you have a little bit stronger feeling about that they actually don't exist, but I could be wrong on that. But basically, I wonder what do you believe is the purpose of a group like this, where we have different people who are kind of putting out their view of what it is that you're, laying out from different perspectives. I believe that there's value in that adds meaning, that adds understanding. It helps me to eliminate certain things that I don't agree with. It helps me refine things that I do agree with. I'm wondering what you think of the purpose of this kind of a group is, or communication is. Why would we represent this thing? Just one final thing that still bothers me, though, it's one thing for me to say that, talking about the Big Bang, if I don't see myself in the universe, if I see myself gone, I don't care. It's another thing for me to be crossing the street and not see a bus coming. I do care, right? Because things happen to me whether I observe that they're there or not. There are things that happen to me whether I observe that they're there or not. Some things that don't, right? The Big Bang, probably has some influence on me at some level, but probably not detectable. The bus coming down the street that I don't happen to see, it isn't a matter that the only way the bus is real is if I'm observing it. If I'm not observing it, it's still going to have an impact on me. So anyway, those two thoughts, of what's your idea, I'm really trying to understand what your idea of the purpose of communicating is, and what's your view of how you would respond to something that you're not observing that would have an actual impact on you?
I think we have it was Alan talked about. I think it was Alan talked about the word itself. Observer is hugely problematic because you don't observe a bus coming to you, but if it hits you, it's not a matter of observing it. You will know if you're still around afterwards, which is another thing which I won't go into now because I could and I won't unless you tempt me to. But the fact is, I hate the word fact, by the way, of course, so I won't use it. When that bus comes, whether you see it or not, you will know. You will know it. And for me, an observer is a knower, not an observer. You don't need to observe. And the other thing you talked about is if you close your eyes, but this is idealism, and I was not talking about that at all. Once you know something, that's it. If you didn't know that an island existed, it didn't exist for you. But as soon as somebody tells you about it, you know it exists for you. If nobody ever tells you, or you never know about that island, the island just doesn't exist. It can't exist. How can it exist for you? It exists for other people. And that's where we come to the individual observer. And all these things have to be reconciled. There are things we know. There are things that Terry knows that I don't. But as soon as he tells me about it, and if I understand it, then I will know about it. But until he does, I just don't. And there's nothing I can do about it until I know about it. That's the whole point of what I said. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is the basis. I can't see how something can exist that you don't know, or something that can happen that you don't know about. What does happening mean? What I don't get it. But basically, I'm saying very something really simple, that it all comes from us individually. That's not solipsism, because I accept that it happens to other people as well. The fact that we've got common knowledge is something that we just talked about, Terry and I. But then you asked something else, which I'm not sure why it's connected. How I see the value of this.
Yeah. Why do two people talk about their own view?
Well, I'm hoping that when I make points or somebody else makes points, that we take it in and we think about it. And I know that most people come with their own ideas, which is fair enough, obviously. But if I make audacious comments, as I did tonight, that most people don't want to believe. Somebody just said, I don't know who that was just now, recently, that that he fervently believes that there is an outside reality. But fervently believe doesn't mean anything. I fervently believe there are fairies in my garden, and they clean the garden when I'm not looking. What does that mean? I fervently believe. I want to believe there's reality. I want to, but that doesn't mean there is reality. And that's I've been going on and on and on and on. It doesn't mean anything to fervently want to believe it. It doesn't make it real. So I'm saying, look, if we all think of different, in inverted commas, facts, then there is no one fact. We fervently believe there must be facts. And I'm saying, why do you say that? Well, that's not testable. And as far as you're concerned, you all of us, not you, all of us have objective beliefs, objective completely, but they're not. They can't be, because other people have got opposite views. How can they be objective? How can we fervently believe? And we do. We know our children are the best. We know it. It's completely objective. But somebody else's kids are perfect for them. So there can't be perfect kids, can there? Apart from mine, of course. Right? That's the whole point. So where does the reality, where does the fervent belief comes in? Like Michael spoke about what there is, because science says it. But that's physics, completely divorced from anything as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not being, as far as I'm concerned, that makes no sense to me. None whatsoever. There are laws in physics that have been made by humans, and laws change. So that it couldn't ever have been a fact if at some point it's going to change. And it has already changed. Where is the fact? Where's the reality? Where is it apart from our fervent belief? And I'm asking, if we got fervent belief, so what? And why are we here? I've forgotten the question. We're here.
Yeah.
We're here.
So I totally agree. A belief in reality doesn't make it real, right? But if I have this idea in my head about something being real out there, and I end up talking with somebody else who has an idea that however they learned about it, maybe they also talked to Terry, whatever, that they once they know about it, they have their idea, and I have my understanding and they have their understanding, and we talk about it, and we maybe come up with something that's a little bit different, and maybe a little bit more reproducible, or maybe so. If it isn't something that exists independent of us, how is it that we're coming to an approximation of something that isn't real to either one of us?
Because we're humans, and so we will never get to anything that's absolutely real. We can't do it. We're curious. We keep on changing things all the time. I can't, you'll never find, or very rarely find somebody who's exactly 100% like you. The same idea is 100%, but the 100% is never 100%. It can't be.
Oh, exactly, but Newton thought that forces interact instantaneously, right? And for his purposes, people talk about Newton's laws were good enough to get us to the moon, So somebody else, Einstein comes along with a different set of equations that explain everything that Newton explained, but then added another level of precision that wasn't possible. I mean, that's not exactly the same thing as saying that he came up with a different view. Einstein was able to reproduce all the same calculations that Newton came up with, but explain some things that Newton couldn't. That to me is the kind of approximation that I'm hoping to get out of this group, that there's something that seems to be out there, independent of you or me, that we each have an approximation of, and I'm trying to understand how we get to a better approximation so that we can all benefit from it. No?
But the difference between us is I don't think there is something out there.
Yeah.
Because if there's something out there, we will eventually get to it. And we won't. It's a basic thing that's very difficult to get across. It's very difficult to think about, because you're left in a very dodgy situation. I don't think that what everybody's looking for, I don't think it exists. And I put exists in inverted commas. I don't think there is that one thing. I think that everybody will have different opinions about things, and everybody wants to find that one thing. And I'm saying, I don't know if there is that one thing. How can there be? And we won't find it here. As wonderful as the people are here, I'm not sure we'll find it this particular month. Maybe next
month.
Yeah, which reminds me, I forgot to mention that next month it will not be on, because I won't be sort of around, as it were. I hope to be alive. I mean, I won't be around. So
I hope you're alive too, but thank you, Ron. I appreciate it.
me
Sorry for
too.
going on.
No, thank you very much. Very, very interesting questions. James, you've been very patient.
Well, this has been going good. I didn't want to say anything today because I'm usually very, very contrary to what you have to say. But what I think has been going on, right, is that people have tackled the issue, right? Terry and particularly Terry and Frank just now. The issue for me involves math. Terry said something about, well, math doesn't come in until a certain point or something like that. And I kind of disagree with that. I think math is always right in front of us as humans. So one of the things that I notice is that whenever we observe something, we're almost always in a group. We don't tend to observe things only by ourselves. I think that's the exception. The idea that you're the only one that has an apparatus that is capable of making an observation. Those situations are actually kind of rare. They're involved in the field. They might be involved in the field of science, that there's a special apparatus that causes everyone to see something that isn't available in another time. But we're all blessed with a kind of a basic apparatus as mammals, right? And as living beings, and the basic apparatus causes us to be in a situation when what we observe is usually being observed by others at the same time. And it seems that if we're in this subjective state, that we can only believe in what the observer could possibly detect or not detect, right? Because those are both possible. Then because not being true is just as important as something being true to us, as humans. This kind of subjectivism doesn't really suit us because we're capable of seeing that not only ourselves have an apparatus when we observe, but other people who have vaguely the same apparatus can observe things that are different. We might observe the sunrise as the appearance of the sun on the horizon and its movement towards the day, right? But we might also, some of us will observe the Earth placing us in a position to see the sun as it rotates and in its rotation. So we might have a completely different understanding of what we're seeing. We also might be taking quantum notes and be observing the phenomenon we're observing through a quantum lens, which would involve different math, of course. So this idea of being an observer involves something extremely dynamic and something that a situation in which we as individuals in our observations as individuals begin to become less important compared to how many observations are actually being made. So like we're in a situation often where our observation might be the same as, perhaps might be similar to the observation of every human being on the earth, or at least every individual in our time zone. So we're constantly in a situation where we're making one observation, or we're in a situation where we might be one of a large group of individuals that are making 2 or 3 different observations at the same time, such as in politics. The idea that, well, what do I know about politics? Am I really taking a position that's left enough, according to what I know of the situation? Am I really grasping the left position in politics correctly? Or am I grasping the right position in politics correctly? Or is this position that I have correct for myself, since I don't see things every day the way everyone else does? So we always have this kind of like independence of mind, independence of facts, but facts can be verified. The only facts that are true are the ones that essentially that can be verified. So if we can verify a fact, then we think it will be true. If we can't verify it, then for us it's untrue. So the difference in the number of observers counts for a lot in the world, not just in science, where the apparatus can so easily swapped out and changed and cause you to give and deliver different data, but in daily life, where we constantly are confronted with commonalities, disagreements, the same data being observed by everyone, but everyone sort of trying to shuffle into a position where they occupy a space shared with others. And we call that a political position, or an ideology, perhaps, to sort of like impose rhetoric on the subject. So this subjectivism doesn't really have any solid basis in science. It doesn't have a solid basis in social events either, because all the social events that we observe are always commonalities. And we don't observe the events in the same way because we're preoccupied by occupying a particular social space or a different one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. I have an idea. How about instead of using the word observer, we use the word knower, and we won't get mixed up with observing things. Observing means
Can you
observing.
spell
Why not
that?
know? Knower with a K.
Knower.
With a
Oh,
K.
knower.
Knower,
Right,
no,
with a K. But
with a
yeah.
K.
Well, the problem of being a knower is that you're in a state. Okay, so everyone is a different knower, but I don't think you solve the problem by switching from observing to knowing.
I think we do.
You're basically because basically the subjective shift causes us to be beset by a whole lot of arguments that don't actually reflect the reality. The reality is that we all know, we all observe, we all have basis for our observation. We all have basis for what we report as our observations or for what we report as our knowledge. And this is not going to change just because
that's the point. Don't use observer, use knower, and you'll see that we're going to get somewhere. We're going to get somewhere. Not perfectly, we're going to get somewhere, because observing just means observing. We don't observe tiny things. We don't see them. That's observing. We have to know. Do we know they're there?
If we have an apparatus, we can observe tiny things.
No, we
the point
can.
We can all observe these tiny things.
No, you can't.
Because if we have,
you
according
can't.
to the apparatus available.
Yes, but it's always us who are doing it anyway. That's my suggestion. You can.
We don't just do it singly, though. We do it in groups. No, that's my point.
I do lots of.
Okay, there you go. No, we don't. We're all individuals, and we all have a subjective single view, and no one will ever agree on anything.
No,
not true.
Of course, we agree on things. We agree on lots of things. Lots of things. Yeah. Lots.
Almost everything. Almost everything.
Oh, that's a big word. Almost.
We're all predicting the same events. We're all involved in. And even when we're contradicting each other, we're basically registering our concern together.
We're all predicting the future differently. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But anyway, thank you very much, James. Very interesting. Roland.
Hi.
Another patient gentleman.
Well, I'm brimming over with patience. Yeah, quite a lot of interesting points. I've got a notice some of them, but I have terrible handwriting, so so I think I wanted to start off with the idea of observation. You picked up a few seconds ago talking to James about this word observer, and I think it's a real problem word as well because it does create this sense of separation. I am observing that thing. And I particularly wanted to talk about that because that to me is utter nonsense. How can anything observe something else? Now, I've never come across anything that acts in that way or works in that way. You take a sensor of some kind, for example, and a sensor does not sense something else. It experiences an interaction. And it's the resultant of that interaction that's then used. So, you have a microphone and there are sound waves. The resultant output from the microphone is the interaction between the sound waves and the structure of the microphone. You can't get rid of the structure of the microphone and say, look, I've observed the sound waves. It's impossible. And I would like to, if I'm wrong about that, then please, someone tell me of some kind of sensor that does not, the structure of which does not actually become directly part of the information that it's receiving or it's processing. Now, if we are receivers of information, then our nature, our structure, whatever our nature happens to be, is indelibly printed on that information. And I want to consider a pretty facetious example, which is a violin and a bow. So supposing you were a violin, and you're experiencing all these feelings. There's these vibrations going on and stuff like this, and you're trying to build a picture of what is going on. What is this force that is causing these vibrations to occur to you? And remember, if you're a violin, you can only model these forces according to the specific tools that you have as a violin. So you've got to use structures that are appearing in you, vibrations, whatever you've got, to actually formulate your model of what's happening in the first place. Are you ever seriously going to get to a picture of a bow? No, of course not. You haven't got a chance because all you're working with is that interaction. There's nothing else to work with. I quite like the model of the violin and the bow because one of the other things about it is that the idea of a force activating a form, we look at the bow, we look at the violin, we can see them, and what emerges is something utterly unlike both of them, sound. Totally unlike both of them. So this notion, I think we really have to get a head around this idea that we are observing something. It's just impossible. And as I said, I think that is a bottom line, that if someone disagrees with that, then I would like to know exactly how anything can observe something without being part of that observation. So that's my first point, really, about what I would say is the impossibility of something observing something else without being part of that observation. The second thing, I really liked Williams' reference to form and content. I thought that was spot on. Although, so I can see that we can encapsulate content in form. We can generate forms that reflect content. And by content, that's where the analogy starts to develop some what ifs, some questions. Because content, what is content? I would say the closest I can get to it is the idea of interference. I mentioned the idea of a sensor receiving information. That's not quite the way I see things, but the best I can come up with is the idea of interference. And then interference over time, because if you just have a one-off interference, it can't mean anything. There's no pattern there. So interference has to be over time, and it has to be recognizable as a continuum of some kind. So that idea of encapsulating that as a form does make sense to me. And we can also see from that idea that the form cannot be anything like the content either, any more than a box is like the contents of the box. So so already, if we look at form as being pattern, as being knowledge of things, we're already a long way away from the idea of something else, something outside that now we've gone through a lot of stages before we've got to that point. So why would we do this anyway? Well, I think the idea of objectification of interference, of change, I would consider, is basically about navigation. It's about anticipation. If we can anticipate the change that may happen to us, then we're more likely to maintain our integrity. So it makes perfect sense to have basically a four-dimensional roadmap, a map of likely interferences over time that then we have behaviors associated with. That doesn't surprise me in the least. So another thing I wanted to talk about was the conversation between Ron and Michael about physics and so forth. I can see there could be a jolly good reason for formulating a common map, because you want to work with other people, you want to share ideas, if you want to create things together so as to unify your actions, then you probably want to construct certain types of objects, of models, understandings that everyone can relate to, so that it's possible for those efforts to be combined and unified. So in order to, how would you do that? Well, you'd have to create some kind of common means by which people can reach agreement. So you'd need evidential criteria. You'd need to be able to say, like, I can do this, can you do that? And if you can't actually do the same thing, for example, I'm thinking about this thing, can you tell me what it is? Well, no, I can't, because I can't see that. Okay, we can't include that as evidence then. Let's see what we can include. So now we have to get evidential criteria, which limits the range of human experience down to a subset of things that people can actually share and measure as well. Have to be common measurements, has to be common methods of ways in which we can experience things and share information. So if you create that type of fabric, that type of modeling, then it starts to take on a sense of reality. It starts taking on, this is how things really are, because that's the way we're interacting with each other. But it's just a model. It's just a model. It's just a convenient map that we use in order to share information, and it represents an intersection of human experience, not a union. So, but I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not saying, oh, well, that's nonsense. That's obviously an incredibly useful thing from our point of view. But let's put it in context. What is it? Well, it's a shared model. It's not reality. Not in the sense of like the truth. It's useful. And that's as far as we can go, I think, with it. And then there's the last thing I wanted to say was about when does our map of reality, as we might call it, our model that we use to navigate through life, when does it actually touch anything that anchors it? And the answer is that tricky word, now. There's no other time which it touches it. You can't test what has happened. You can't test what will happen. You can only test now. You can only do a validation of something you believe or assert now, whatever now means. And now is a very, very complex idea, I think, because it's not really inside time. It feels like it's something different. So, but I'm not going to go into that lark, really. But what I'm more saying is that our map only touches the testable at this one moving point. And I can see why it's very tempting to go, well, this moving point we're experiencing must be something like the model we've created in our minds of how things are. Yeah, the map of reality that we have inside our head that we use. It must be something like that, surely. But we've got no idea. We've got absolutely no idea what is going on now, apart from how it impacts upon this complex interaction that we've turned into knowledge. So that's what I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rowan. You realize, of course, that when you say now,
I know, yes.
I'm jumping up and down because
that's why I surrounded it with caveats.
Yes, I know you try. It's okay. It's okay, except that now is gone.
Yeah.
Always gone.
Yeah,
so
it has.
That is problematic, but it's very good with a map.
It's another good topic.
Yes.
For your monthly discussion.
We're done now, by the way. I think
you
we
can't have done. It's gone.
Exactly. So we're in big trouble. But we've done everything. I think we've been going for over 5 years. We've done everything. I'm going to do everything again. It'll come out completely different. Completely. Not just because they're different people, but it'd just be different because everything that's past, etc., the way we think. Very, very interesting, by the way. Thank you very much, Roland. Michael.
Okay, I took notes because there are so many interesting points raised by different people, but at least what I remember on Richard's comment, yes, absolutely, debugger can change results. And not only because of optimizations in the code, but if you are dealing with multi-threading applications, especially with race conditions, when specific timing can be important, and when you are running it in a debugger, it could slightly affect this timing. Yes, this could happen. Then who said this? Terry, about how can we reconcile the existence of multiple observers at the same time without considering the physical reality and physical interactions between them. So a quick answer, we cannot. We have to consider this. And there are some interesting proposals like relational quantum mechanics, for instance, which is treating it's kind of going more radically in Copernicus direction. So a human or human observer, there is nothing special about them. They are just quantum systems. So the idea that each quantum system is observing another quantum system. And it resolves in pretty elegant ways some notable paradoxes of quantum mechanics. So I would recommend to take a look. Relational quantum mechanics. Then what Roland and James commented that I am very much in agreement with this, that each of us is not acting as an individual observer, but we are observing and interacting with the reality together and creating shared models of this reality. which sometimes we call the truth or scientific truth, but this is really a shortcut because it's still subjective experience, but it is a collective subjective experience. And this is what we are mostly dealing with, because even if I'm doing some kind of measurement on a quantum system, it's easy to forget that even the idea of this measurement and interpretation of results, it's not coming from my mind, it's coming from whatever books, papers of this collective subjective experience. And the measurement apparatus, most likely it's not that I designed and made it, it's probably provided by others. So it's all this collective enterprise. But another way to look at this is that even if I consider an individual observer, an individual human brain, and we could ask, what actually involves, what physical processes are involved in the act of observation of anything? When we see something, when we hear something, what is happening? And what is happening are, of course, physical processes in our brains, and chemistry and biology, it's all physical processes at the end. But not any kind of physical processes. It should be the processes that would change some states of our brain that we consider as experience or memory. So, for instance, if photon interacts with atom and changes its state, and it's not committed to our memory or not observed, so it's not causing the cascading effect of neural activity that what we experience as act of seeing something, for instance, or hearing something. Then it's not a part of our experience, really. And so if we take this view that experience is something that changes the state of a system, and I'm now talking about observers as physical systems. So it's another level of discussion would be about observers as humans interacting with each other with common knowledge and society and so on. But now I am talking about physical processes. And so my conclusion is that the act of observation, it's pretty much detection, maybe would be a better term for this, is the change of system state as a result of interaction with another system. And someone mentioned that there is nothing other than interactions. Well, in some sense, yes, but for these interactions, in order to make sense of them, they have to result in change in the states of the systems. And it does not matter whether this is a microscopic system, like an atom interacting with photon and changing its state, or this is a human brain or other human mind changing its state. In both cases, what we experience is the change of the state of the system. But an interesting question is what would make something a state of the system? Because a lot is going on, not only in our brain, but in any microscopic system. It's always something happening. A lot of microscopic processes, but when we describe the system at appropriate level, these processes don't matter. So they all correspond to the same state of the system. But there are some special kind of special states. When these states are changing, then something a big or substantive change is happening with this system that makes it different from the other state. And I don't know if there is any one coherent way to represent these important states, so to say. But one idea that comes to mind is this pointer states in quantum Darwinism. And another related idea is this pure quantum state. So if you're familiar with quantum mechanics, there could be mixed states and there could be pure states. And when you take a measurement of a system, the mixed state disappears and becomes a pure state, which could be mapped to this pointer state in quantum Darwinism. And this mixed state, by the way, someone said that we have infinitely many states, but strictly saying it's not infinite. So for any finite system, and I'm talking about a quantum system, it has only a finite, a discrete spectrum, using this technical term. So it cannot be in any state, even mixed state. So the mixed state can be a combination of only a finite number of states of the system. And so what can happen in this act of measurement or the act of interaction between observer, and observer can be another physical system, not necessarily a human, between an observer and the system, is that a system essentially makes a choice. So it transitions from this mixed state to one specific and well-defined state that what we call the pure state in quantum mechanics. And this is what is sometimes called a collapse of quantum state or collapse of wave function, when the system transitions from this mixed state to a pure state. And I would guess that maybe this is what makes any act of observation, when the system essentially is choosing one state, one new state. And when we are talking about human observers, of course, we only sense this when this new state or transition to new state is committed to memory and brought into our field of attention. But the underlying idea is still the same. So when we have this transition to a new state, we can relate it to the act of detection or observation, or however we call it, at the most elemental, fundamental level. And so probably there is more to say about this, but let me stop at this. But this is a very rich topic, which is related to so many other things, but maybe we could have discussions separately about these other things. But anyway.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm just going to ask one question, all right? Just one. To everything you said. What you said is very interesting. It's physics. It might be right, might be partly right, might be completely right. My only question is, if there's nobody in the world at all, are these things happening?
Then
how would we know?
A simple answer, it would be a different world. And someone asked about
that's cheating.
Whether the moon would exist if no one is watching it.
No,
but
no, that's No, that's idealism. That's nothing to do with it. Once you know the moon is there, it's there. Even if you don't look at it. No, that's different.
Well, what I would say on this, that any what we call observation or any interaction, it's a physical process. So if I am not observing you, that means that I am changing you because there is no interaction between us. And,
no. If you're not here, right, then you're not observing me.
Right.
And if I'm not here also, what knowing is going on? What observation is there, and what is happening? And how could what does it mean, all that stuff, when there's nobody there? Nobody. That's the whole point of what I was saying, and that is my point with physics. And I'm not saying you're wrong with anything you said. Okay, I'm not a physicist. I'm just asking that simple question, and then you would need to answer it.
Okay, so I'm still not sure that I understand correctly your question, but if we expand our notion of observers to all physical systems.
No, but we can't exchange notes if neither of us is here. That's my only point. It's a small point.
But if under nodes you mean the nodes that that make sense only to us humans, then without humans this all would disappear, right? But not the physical world which was reflected in these nodes, because the physical world is much bigger than we are. It has many other interacting systems, with their own interactions and their own experiences, probably.
Systems have experiences. Okay.
Well, why not?
Well, I can't answer that.
Not our experience, their experiences.
Okay. We're going to carry this on somewhere else. But thank you very much. Very, very interesting indeed. Murad, you're very, very patient, and I appreciate it, and so do we all.
Thank you very much. So I'm a relative newbie to epistemology. I started looking into it maybe a few months ago or less than a year ago to pursue other research projects. And one of the things I've realized rather rapidly, and correct me if I misinterpreted the field, but there's a certain angst or conflict of identity that seem to emerge out of the epistemology field. There is, on the one hand, which I can recognize as proper philosophy, which is the concern of the framework of how knowledge is represented. So a theory of knowledge is like, what is knowledge? What's the framework of knowledge? And how the various abstractions and elements that need to be put together to really encompass and describe that. And then there seems to be a lot of epistemologists who also try to have an opinion or inferences from that into, well, can knowledge, theory of knowledge or knowledge systems have anything? How can we know that these knowledge systems are saying anything truthful or useful about reality? So they're concerning themselves with what is actually true, which I think ultimately is not a question for philosophy. And the reason is, so it is not the job of epistemology, as far as my impressions so far, is to really have a say in terms of what is accurate theory of motion or the atom or whatever, what is not. And the reason is because the accuracy of our knowledge about various domains are different sciences. They're different disciplines. So what we need to do to actually build a good theory of matter is physics, not epistemology, right? And so forth with psychology, so forth, etc. And so that's my contention, is that there's an element that is lumped under epistemology that is appropriately classified as something that epistemology doesn't really have a lot to say about. It is different sciences. And then on top of that, especially in this group, what I say is yet another third domain that people seem to concern themselves with, which is the implementation of the knowledge systems, almost like a technology. Like, for example, the comments were made earlier about how sensors, you should not, there is no objective observer because every sensor will only react with the phenomena in a way that is very, very unique and individualistic and specific to the sensor. It never reflects the true nature of what's being observed, which I think is entirely irrelevant to philosophy, right? It is so it is an implementation of the knowledge system. It is how a particular sensor is interacting with external events, right? And yes, of course, it is not the external event. It's the signature that the external thing observed is leaving on that sensor. So it is sensor specific. Nonetheless, it is a set of information that is being extracted from the observable. And the sensor doesn't matter because whatever's using that sensor is factoring out the sensor specificity from the input that's being derived. So a lot of the conversation that took place today, I saw, is a lot of it is entirely irrelevant, I think, to Ron's basic contention, which is strictly epistemological, right? Where we sort of we're spending a lot of time talking about what is actually true and how to implement knowledge systems, and that's not so. But this is my understanding. Please correct me if I'm off here. But the way I understood Ron's basic contention is that the observer is one of the components, abstracted philosophically, of the epistemological process, right? It is the input. And if we so every epistemological process has a knowing agent that is engaging in that. And I contend that I'm perfectly fine with saying that animals have their own epistemological processes, systems and robots have their own. The most interesting for us is what the epistemological process that humans exercise. And from that perspective, if a human is not receiving input or is unable to recognize a certain observed, then that observed doesn't exist. Not in reality, but to that human, right? That human in their comprehensive sort of set of bits and pieces of information that are conglomerated into an epistemology for them, that observable is missing, so it doesn't exist. So it's straightforward stuff. Like there's nothing uncontroversial in my mind about it. If you, in fact, think of the process as an epistemology that has been constructed and refined and developed by a human, for that human's purposes. Yeah. If nobody has ever told me about Mount Everest, in my own mind, Mount Everest does not exist. Okay. So I think if that's the perspective, that the observer is simply whatever part of the epistemological agent, and if you like, that I would call what is it? The known or knowable, not the knowable. I forget what Ron you suggested in
the knower. You mean instead of observer?
Yeah, instead of observer, you called it
the knower with a K.
The knower. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so the knower is essentially to me it makes more sense is that the entity that is integrating various observations to synthesize something that is more coherent and more and is in the realm of information and understanding rather than observation, which just means detection. It's like you're receiving information, but you don't know yet how it integrates or fits into the rest of the picture that you assemble. So if that's what's being said, then I think a lot of what we spend time on today is sort of does not add or subtract from that. It is sort of a different conversation altogether. And if that's the case, then I see that contention is fairly straightforward. There's you know, if we focus on the philosophy aspect of it rather than the much more concern with do we understand reality? What's our ability to understand reality objectively? Does reality exist, which is everything external to us, objectively, so that the talk about multiple observers, are they all observing? Is there something in common? It's all being filtered by the different observers, but does the information being broadcast, is that being sent out of something that is coherent and common and available to all observers, so that at least they start from a common source, but then eventually they sort of bias it in various ways and understand in various ways. And fine, we can argue that if these observers, various observers slash knowers, can get to agree on anything, there's gotta be something common that was the source of their information, so that at least by the time they get to process it, that commonality is shown somewhere, right? So, you know, all of that is great, but but I would say it's not philosophy, right? It is just the fact that you are saying that that every epistemology is unique and differentiated for every observer slash knower, and they're never going to be exactly the same because we're all limited in our bandwidth, all limited in what we've experienced, all limited in how we synthesize these experiences into a rule-based understanding. So, in other words, every idea that Ron has presented so far, this meeting and the previous, fits perfectly, makes perfect sense, as long as we don't concern ourselves with all of these externalities that seem to be irrelevant to me. So here's what I would like to see. What do you think in response? Is that roughly fine?
Thank you very much, man. It's very interesting. I agree with quite a bit of it, but of course, basically, I can't, because as far what I've put forward was that the basis of epistemology must be epistemology of someone having
right
the knowledge, and that must be the basis as far as I see. And after that, you can talk about psychology or physics or whatever you want, but they all have to come back to us. They have to. Without us, there isn't anything. And it's not. It is. But the point is, it's not just us. And you're right. There's common knowledge, which is not common. It's common, but it's approximate, and it's good enough. And Michael always speaks about the use of things, and he's right. And Debbie, when she says stuff, also talks about the use, and Roland did, and James certainly does, and that. But the use of something is the something that we know. That's the only point. It is difficult speaking about something that has no use per se, and perhaps that's why we're here to talk about things that perhaps, I don't know, make very little sense about day-to-day living. But that's metaphysics is one of those things that you either want to live with it or not. And I rather like living with it, and I don't know why, because perhaps I'm crazy, but it sort of makes sense to think about it. And it makes just as much sense to what you said, Morad. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Thank you. Tim, you're even more patient. So well done. Where are you? Ah, there you are.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I am, but thank you. Okay, so you can, in kind of a concise, or, just looking not to try to take up too much time here, you're looking for a response. You're talking about the universe or whatever not existing without the observer, but kind of in a, what is it you're looking for a response more in a kind of a concise, how can we say, declaration? What you're looking for a response to what here? What would be the question? Kind of the meat of the question that you, for which you're looking for a response here, so that I can kind of gear my, if you understand what I'm trying to say here or ask.
I'm not sure. What do you mean? I'm not sure. I'm looking for
Okay, so I guess I'll
response.
say it, try to say it kind of in a basic way then. The question to which I should respond here, you're looking for a response to which question, in essence?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I have questions. I have a point that I want to bring over, which is a difficult point. I'm not saying it's easy. It's very difficult. Very, very difficult. Very difficult to work
All things
in
are
that
easy.
field.
All things are easy. Go ahead. It's just a belief, right? This is difficult. That's not difficult. Everything is easy. Go ahead.
Okay, if you think this is easy, it's great.
Okay.
I'm all for it.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, that's it. No, I mean, if you think I'm saying everything is easy, I may be all right. Maybe it is.
All right. I was just alluding to a perspective a person takes, but what should I respond here? What is it that you kind of have something to which you're looking for a response? And I understand about the observer being connected with the reality or being disconnected. So kind of in a more distilled way, that's the way to put it. For what are you looking in response in a more distilled fashion? What would be the question?
Everybody's had had a response, and every response is viable.
Okay.
And it's all made by people. That's my only thing. It's not made by nobody. There is nothing made by nobody.
Okay. To what should I respond here? What is the, it's like kind of like a question that you are for which you're looking for a response. The kind of distilled, to what should I respond to so I can give my response? You know what I mean?
Anything you want.
Oh, but I want to know kind of, because I don't know exactly, you're talking about how the without an observer there wouldn't be anything, and then the observer is the observer. Are we part of the universe, or the universe, or reality, or is reality part of us? Okay, so but in more pointed fashion, I want to know to what should I respond to, because I don't know exactly word to word to direct my response. That's what everybody was doing here, was making a response to something.
Okay.
Okay.
If you didn't exist,
okay,
what then?
We're not going to like my answer. It's not possible for me not to exist.
Exactly. So
it's not possible for none of us not to exist.
I agree.
Okay.
So that's what I'd like you to respond to. If you don't exist, what would you respond to?
There's no response to the question.
Exactly.
I cannot
that's
not
it.
exist.
I know. Well, you cannot exist. When you're dead, you don't exist.
I don't even know whether there's a state where we can be dead.
In that case,
okay,
I can't respond to that at all.
Okay, so should I elaborate on that?
You can't.
In relation to,
you can't. If you don't exist, you can't elaborate on anything.
No. In relation to, I don't know whether we can even we even be dead.
It's not in relation to anything. When you're dead, you're dead. Not in relation.
Oh.
You're not related to anything.
Okay.
That's it. So
if you don't mind here, then is that okay?
Pardon?
If you don't mind, even in physics, they already established that matter isn't even really matter, right? Because the
That's not an
particle is
answer to what I said. If you're dead, can you respond to me?
okay. And I said I don't even know whether we can really be dead.
Well, in that case, that's a response that doesn't make sense. Because
Okay,
if
I
you
was going to
don't,
elaborate on that. Why I'm saying that.
well, can we move on a little bit? Because being dead is being dead, as far as I'm concerned. And I know that there's spiritual stuff, but
Oh,
it's not what we're dealing with, because we can go anywhere with that. With all due respect to any spiritualists here, that's not where we're going tonight,
okay.
today, morning, afternoon, whatever, of which I
Um,
wouldn't know about if I wasn't here.
okay,
Anyway,
so
but
you're sure you're not closing your mind here to something? I kind of sense.
definitely closing my mind to being dead. My mind wouldn't be here to be
Okay.
open.
Forgive me if the mind is closed to something.
No, the
Then
mind is not closed.
it
The
can't
mind isn't
perceive
there.
information beyond that.
No, there's no information to somebody who's dead. No, there isn't, unless you're spiritual, which I'm not. If you are, then
Okay.
that's another discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so that's my reaction. That you wanted to have a reaction, that's a reaction you can't have. So that's it, right?
I may not have.
You can't have. So can we?
I'm not allowed to have a
No,
reaction.
no. It's not allowed. You can't. You're dead. You're now alive. You can have reaction, but if you're not, you can't. That's all. I mean, there is nothing else.
Oh,
right? Okay. Did that answer?
You know, I don't know whether this is okay, but if you want to have it this way, you're closing yourself off here.
No, I'm not.
But you don't see it right now. You're keeping
No,
yourself
no,
within
I'm
this
not.
circle,
I'm
and you're
not.
not allowing yourself to go beyond.
I can't go
outside of the
beyond death.
circle.
I can't go beyond death. You can. I
Oh.
can't. And nobody I know can.
But you're not willing to. You weren't even willing to hear me to explain why I say I don't know even whether we can be dead.
No,
You
no.
weren't
I
even
can't.
willing
No.
to hear that. You close yourself off to just
No, I haven't
being
closed
dead.
myself to anything apart from life.
Okay. Okay.
So can we move? Can we move over to Josh? Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh.
Okay.
If you're walking, you're alive. It's okay. Carry on.
That's right. As long as I'm walking, I'm not dead. All right. So here's a strategy to knock one of the legs off of your thesis, and then hopefully I can go on from there and knock another leg off. And that's the comparison between humans and other animals on the topic of what it means to observe, or more accurately, to know. Right? There's it tends to be a kind of preferred way of thinking among many philosophers as well as psychologists and others still. I mean, it's a long-standing way of thinking that differentiates us from other species. We tried a lot of theories. Only humans use tools, only humans have any kind of even proto-language, only humans have culture, only humans feel emotion, but we still hold on to certain precious, very long-standing presuppositions. It's man, the rational animal. So man, the observer, the knower, still seems to be for many something unique to humans. And that's if we think of knowing as representing the way things are. But if we look at what knowing is in a way that has been touched upon by others here who said, that they prefer thinking of knowing in terms of doing or enacting or producing. If you think of knowing in those terms, if when we know something, we have we're interacting with an aspect of our world which we're adapting to. That is to say, we're assimilating something when we observe something or know something. We're assimilating something, let's say a bit of information, but in assimilating it, we're also adapting ourselves to what it is that we know. So there's a kind of a constructive process taking place, and it's not just in the brain, because if you want to get the most powerful and effective way of understanding what the implications of human knowing are, you have to look around you at our built environment, and that includes our language, our technologies, our arts, our physical environment, the way that our practices with respect to each other, and every minor change in those things is the manifestation of knowing. It's not just an effect of knowing, it is the knowing itself. To know is to interact with an aspect of, in other words, knowing is part of an ecological loop that situates human beings within an environment. And in describing that, I'm describing something which is not unique to humans. It's unique to any living system. Any living system is not a being that's plopped into an environment. Any system, including a human being, is an environment. We are the environment. It's only artificially that we separate me as a person defined by the outer layer of my skin from you and from the other objects, living and non-living, that we interact with. That's artificial. That doesn't give us any way of really understanding what knowing is, any more than if you take a liver, from somebody and you slap it on a table and you say, I'm going to try and figure out what this thing is for by looking at it sitting on the table. Well, obviously, you're not going to understand what the liver is for without seeing how it functions within the body, seeing how the body functions within its environment. So, from that perspective, as I said, any living system, including plants, are sentient in the sense that that is to say that they are in direct contact, interactive contact with an environment in which they are assimilating and accommodating. So there's a kind of a built niche that any animal system, including ours, has. Now, the difference between ours and other animals is that we continue dramatically to change that niche, that knowledge niche. We build it and construct it and reconstruct it. But to say that it is leading toward an accurate, or that even the aim is an accurate representation of the way things are, that the aim of knowledge is the accurate facts, the truthful facts of the world, I think is a kind of a quaint sort of, kind of a distortion of what in fact is simply
Josh,
that we produce. Yeah.
You are looking at the world from God's point of view, which is okay, but I'm not. That's not what I'm talking about. The only way your thing works is by looking at it from up there, looking at it from nowhere. And what does it feel like to be a bat, to quote Nagel? No, this is you're going to God's view of the world. No. That's not what I'm saying. That's the exact opposite to what I'm saying. From God's point, in inverted commas, God's point from up there, everything is equal because he knows it all, but we don't know it all. And that's what I'm limiting us to, or what knowledge is can only be from what humans and each one of us can possibly know. That's epistemology. It has nothing to do with what cats know, or what amoebas know. They don't know in the way we do.
But your epistemological point of view is itself a view from nowhere if you don't recognize or define what it means to be a person or a self, a subjective. What is the subject that has a subjective point of view?
Okay,
if you tap into the,
that's fair enough.
If you tap into the strains that I'm making use of, in my description of relation between us and other animals, self-organizing systems, and
That's
that type.
fine.
Those tap into phenomenology. The phenomenology, which I think actually challenges the epistemological point of view, because it doesn't assume a subjective vantage. It assumes a subject-object interaction, which has to begin from anybody's actual experiencing at the moment,
Exactly.
which doesn't allow one to.
Exactly.
But that no more allows you to assume a reified subject than it does a reified world. But you're critiquing a reified world, but you're maintaining a reified subject.
No, whatever you say is correct, and it all comes to what we decide we're going to look at. Phenomenology, which is another topic we're going to do at some point. Metaphysics against phenomenology, by the way, but they go together as far as I'm concerned. But whatever you say is correct, and it always comes back to the point that you're doing the looking at. You want to look at amoebas, do amoebas think? It's you who are looking at it. Don't ask the amoeba.
But where does the me every minute come from? What is it that's coming back to itself as the me? Do I come back to myself and self? There is this core self that I make use of that's sitting there in the background that has certain characteristics, or does the self come back to itself, always changed by the world that it interacts
very
with?
possible.
Is there such a thing? Is there such a thing as a self without this absolutely essential, inextricable interaction, which changes the very meaning of what it means to be a self in some subtle way in every interaction, in every observation?
I'm not disagreeing with you. It all comes back to what you are wondering about. It doesn't. You can't move away from that, because you're talking about other things that might think that Satan's sentient, etc., etc. But it's you who are doing it. You're the basis. There's nothing beyond it. It's you. It's you. It's you. That's it. That's my only point. And you're agreeing with me.
But then you're making are you not making a distinction between a category called the human and a category called the non-human, or the rest of the animal kingdom?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
And how are you justifying that philosophically?
I've been justifying it for the last 3 hours.
You haven't said anything about what it is that animals are lacking.
I'm not. Whatever I think about animals, it's me who's doing the thinking. That's all I'm saying. It all comes back. It all comes back to me, to you, to all of us. It all comes back. I'm saying that as the absolute bottom, and from there you can move wherever you want. I don't care. It's fine. That's all I'm saying.
So before you're a person or an animal or any kind of a label, you're you. That the you is more fundamental than any of those categories, right? Or no?
Each one of his. My point is, each one is fundamental. From there you can go wherever you want, but you always come back to what you are discussing. Always. You're not going anywhere else. I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just making that one point. I agree with you 100%, Josh. I'm not arguing.
And I do agree with you on that. So yeah, all right.
That's it. That's it. I made a very, 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 very basic point. And from there you can go wherever you want. Right?
I'm not concerned that it's about its being so. The reason I think that that one can defend that from the notion of solipsism is that one must then have to say, one must have to make a comment about the supposed continuity of this I from minute to minute. One has to look at how that I functions in time, how it changes, and I think that.
I think it's what Roland was talking about. Roland wasn't. You were talking about continuity, right? Can you hear me, Roland? I can't hear you though.
Yeah, sorry. Continuity.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, yes, no. I don't. Josh, I don't disagree with you. I'm making a stand, right? I'm literally. You're doing a walk. I'm doing a sit. But But basically,
Yeah.
it all comes from here. It can't come from anywhere else. I can't
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
That's it. I agree. I'm not disagreeing. Okay. So it's a way of looking at the world.
Yeah. No, I'm very sympathetic to that because I do think, I don't know if you feel that, phenomenological points of view, Husserl's or Merleau-Ponty's or some of the others
Very interesting. I'm with you.
they're tapping into something it sounds to me similar to what you're saying.
No, yeah, you're right. And we'll do a thing on that. Phenomenology and how the two fit together, which is a very interesting topic, I think. Anyway, thank you very much, George. I agree with you. The only one I don't agree with is Michael, but in a very friendly way. Michael, go for it.
For the sake of time, just one aspect that we did not yet include into our discussion, although I think it's maybe important, that when we are talking about an observer observing something, we have to remember that this is an interaction between what we observe and what we are observing to. So because even if we are talking about, say, two humans observing each other, or one human observing another physical system, or two physical systems observing each other, it's always the act of interaction. And interaction, it implies that it's action between systems. It changes both systems. Although in many practical situations, the change to a system that we are observing could be negligible, but in fact, again, assuming that the world exists behind my experience, and assuming that I tentatively accept the quantum mechanical interpretation of this world, any interaction between systems creates an entanglement between these systems. So the entanglement is very easy to create. And it's theoretically impossible to destroy. Practically, it's very easy to destroy. Once it can be dissolved in the change in a large enough system, then the entanglement is no longer detected. But it never goes away completely. So I think it just could be important to remember that whether we are talking about interactions between humans or even between physical systems, it's always a two-way street, so to say. All systems involved in this interaction, they all are somehow affected, although maybe one system is affected much in more noticeable way than another one, but theoretically they all are affected. And this makes the questions, what would happen if I did not see something, or if I even did not exist, this gives the answer. So if this did not happen, then something else would be different without me. Let me stop this for the sake of time.
You do realize that I don't agree with that, right? But the very fact that how something can happen that nobody knows about is beyond me. Me personally, I don't get it. I understand what you're saying, and I understand it's the physics. But
well, so my view is that there are many other something other than me. If I accept this view, if I reject solipsism, in other words. from solipsist position, yeah,
I'm not a
I can make
solipsist.
any conclusions, but
I'm not a solipsist. Definitely not.
yeah. But if I accept the existence of this reality, then that's the only conclusion that I can make, that without me, something would be different.
For whom? Michael? Oh.
Yeah.
No, for whom will it be different?
For some other systems with I would or would not interact in the same way. Even if these are microscopic systems that no one would notice, but they still could entangle with other systems and with bigger systems, and something would be different.
Okay.
So just basically a position of humility. So I don't think that I matter so much in the world that I'm so different from other parts of it. Other parts exist, but I'm interacting with them and I'm changing them. And they're changing me, of course.
Ah, of course.
Yeah.
That's the point. Thank you very much, Michael. We'll have to continue this sometimes. It will go on forever, this particular conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. And by the way, you're very important for everybody here. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's all right. Okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Roland.
Yeah, I guess I made a few points. I'm not sure how relevant they are, but the guy who was talking about death has gone. So,
Thank God.
I thought it might be worth saying something about it, simply because it's kind of an interesting idea.
What is death?
Yeah, I mean, if something is dead, to say something is dead, it kind of means something, doesn't it? It means it's not there anymore, or it's not functional anymore. So if one says, "Well, I know that I'm dead," then I'm not really dead, am I?
Not only are you not really dead, you're not dead at all.
Exactly. So it's an interesting idea that it's an interesting use of the idea of dead to sort of not really mean it or something. But
you're
I guess
right.
that you can think of the idea of parts of a system that, like, you have a tree and the branch could die, but the tree's still there. Or you might get frostbite and your sort of toes might die.
I think you're.
But you'd still know that you're that.
I think you're cheating a bit here.
I am, yeah. Anyway, I just thought there's a kind of possibly a lack of precision in the use of the word. The other thing,
if you're going to mention that, since we're on this morbid topic, do you realize that we, each of us, is never dead? Because we
could never know that we were dead. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no we at that point. There's no we left for other people, but not us. But carry on, since you mentioned it.
The other thing I can't say I was entirely clear about some of the things Josh was getting at, but one of the things that I was quite interested in was the idea of the self. And that I find that very interesting idea, what the self is and when it appears. And I think the self can only appear in relation to an else. It's like the other side of it. So I see the self as it's like a part of our map. And I can't easily see the idea of continuity as being compatible with the self. So one of my sort of metaphors I think of in that is a whirlpool in a river. You know, you can identify the whirlpool and you can see it, and look, there's a whirlpool. But if you tried to stick it in a bucket, it would stop. You can't disconnect it. And in fact, if you actually wanted to find out where the whirlpool ended, pardon me, you'd have a problem because where does it end? I mean, the whirlpool is actually the river, isn't it? Where do you draw the line? So the line between self and else has to be drawn by us somehow. But I won't go any further into that because it's quite a complicated idea. But it's an interesting area to think about. The other thing that occurred to me just at the end of Michael's observations was the word happening. And what is a happening? And that's quite an interesting question too. Where does a happening happen? I think someone has to observe a happening, don't they? Things happen to people.
Yeah, but I
even
mentioned that somebody has to
yeah.
be there for something to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, "Oh, did you see in the news that thing happened?" But that's slightly different use of happen, isn't it? It's like a it's a again, it's a piece of knowledge that has been turned into been given a time. So you receive a piece of, like, for example, I could say, I could buy a pencil from a shop and say, well, at some point it must have happened that that pencil was made. But that is more like a part of my construction of how I think that pencil has got a past and a future. But the actual process of identifying a happening is a different thing altogether. And I did wonder how much of the things that Michael was talking about in terms of, like, for example, physical systems observing each other, how much of that is actually what I would call imaginary? It's basically maths. It's hypothetical situations rather than happenings. Because then the question is, well, does a happening have to involve a person in order to be a happening as opposed to an imagined thing, an imagined happening? And this is an area I'm quite interested in, particularly at the moment. I'm thinking about this quite a lot, is the point at which our picture of the world that we create touches something that is actually usable, that is, I suppose, that regulates it. What this thing that we could call now, which, is a bit of a hated word, but still, I'm going to call it now because everyone vaguely understands what I think I'm talking about there. So now is this point of testability, isn't it? Where we can anchor something. And it's the point at which we say, oh, it's happening. It's happening now. Whereas other happenings, like, oh, it might happen, or it did happen, those are no imagined happenings. So we can't really go back to them or go forwards to them until we get there. And even then it will be different. So this when does happening happen? I think happening is really a sort of synonym for now. So
yes,
if it is a synonym for now, then there has to be an observer. And in our imagined happenings, it's an imagined observer rather than a real one. We can imagine all sorts of stuff, can't we? Imagine what things are going to be like. And when we remember things, we are imagining what they were like. And we can't go back to them. We might be able to substantiate them with evidence. So, I can imagine that I left my pencil in the drawer and I can go and look in the drawer and say, yeah, there it is. There it is. But I can't go back to the happening. I can only remember it. Happenings take place now. So anyway, I'll stop there. It's interesting.
There's a lot of interesting stuff.
Interesting thought. Thank you.
Very, very good. Josh, you're a glutton for punishment, you are.
I am. As long as I walk, I philosophize.
That's it, as I was about to say. Walking keeps you going.
That's right. That's what Kierkegaard said, I was enjoying what Roland was saying, and that sounds very phenomenological to me. So you have the specious present, which is the now, which is a fat now. The fat now includes the just past. Not the long ago, but the just past. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to enjoy any temporally unfolding experience like music if all we had was this discrete now. It wouldn't make any sense. It would have to be some sense of enjoying a larger, richer context. So, and then at the same time, we're always being thrown, intending, forward. That's all a part of this sort of this, whatever this mysterious space of the now is, if you want to call it that. But to say, and Husserl talked about how sort of even my sense of myself in the past is sort of, that's kind of indirect. It's not, I don't have a, as Roland was pointing out, I don't have a direct experience of that past, because it's past. But I can recall it, and now it's a present experience, right? So now it's a kind of a, it's something that I've reactivated, but in reactivating it, it is now a new now that we call the remembered past. And so in one way or another, you're always faced with this space of the now, but so, so you can think of sort of, as Husserl does, the self as the center of activity. It's a center of activity. It doesn't really have any content in itself. It's a center of activity where there's always, it's projecting forward, it's anticipating forward. But I think the other thing that's interesting about that phenomenological understanding of the now and the self is that it has to incorporate, it incorporates an outside and others directly into it, because it can't be, the I that is intending or experiencing from moment to moment. It's always a new now. It's always it's always incorporating something alien to it, into it. And part of what it's incorporating includes, the objects that's dealing with, and just as importantly, or more importantly, the social environment. So, our sense making is, you can call it participatory sense making, that built into our very sense of ourself is our relation to others. But the catch is, and I think, Ron, you would be, would approve of this, it's always our relation to others from a vantage, right, which must come from our perspective. So it's one in which we can, to be a self is always to be a self which is ensconced within or shaped by that larger, social and human environment. But we always approach our ensconcement, our belonging to that environment from a vantage which is our own. So there's both. So that both explains how we can partially share experiences with a larger community, including knowledge. We can partially share it. We can all say, yeah, we agree. But then at the same time, it always must give room for the uniqueness of the individual vantage. And so, and if you burrow further into this, again, into the self, if the self is this, community, if we are a community unto ourselves, we have, a whole horizon of past experiences and, expectations pointing, having a horizon that points into the future. If we have our habits and our personal histories, and all those things are part and parcel of what it means to, to encounter our world from moment to moment, then if we say we are already a community in that sense, then perhaps it's a bit arbitrary then where we draw the line between this so-called internal community of I and this external community, except by the fact that if we say other persons, it's already implied when we think in terms of other persons that there's some sort of a gap there, that there's some sort of a shift in meaning that must take place between the community of I, right? That's sort of, has my history and my expectations and all that, and then my dealing with another person, right? It's the issue of empathy. And by empathy, I don't mean whether we care about other people, but how do we recognize other people as having their own perspectives in the first place? small children have difficulty with that. Autistic people, have it's a challenge to deal with other people, and there are different approaches within psychology to try to explain this. There's a theory of mind approaches, which suggests that each of us, in order to understand another person, that we come up with an internal model of them, and then we try to apply it to them. Others say that we simulate their behavior internally, and then we try to apply it to them. But the approach that I think is more that makes more sense is an interactive approach, where no, I directly understand you through your behavior. That doesn't mean that I'm understanding you in the exact same way that you're understanding yourself. I couldn't possibly, but I directly relate to you, not by consulting some internal scheme and then applying it to you, but through the interaction with you. So it's an interesting, I think what you brought up is this interesting kind of complex area of, the divide between self and others, the extent to which we only, we have to go back to the uniqueness of our perspective on the one hand, but on the other hand, the fact that that doesn't get in the way of our being able to, for most purposes, being able to arrive at a consensus and feeling that we belong to larger normative communities.
Yes, thank you very much, Josh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very, very interesting indeed. Very interesting discussion. I enjoyed it, and lots to think about, I think. In which case, just remind you that next month, nothing will be happening. Nothing will be happening, okay? You realize why, right? We won't be here. Nothing will be happening. So I wish you all a very good month, and etc. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very, very much, everybody. It was terrific. Bye.